Things a little crazy in Washington and on the border, huh?
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Yeah, I've been anxious to hear what Professor Marc Genest thinks about North Korea. Oh yeah, North Korea. That historic summit happened like way back a couple of Mondays ago. It is amazing in Trump world, the United States of America right now, that something so potentially, supposedly, in reality, so significant is just, moving through the news cycle and, gets lost. And I'm sure the president would like to have, well, you know what? I'm not sure what the president wants. I don't know what he wants, but maybe Marc will know what he wants. I want to talk about all the immigration stuff that's dominating the news cycle, and then we'll talk about North Korea. Great to have you in. It's Tuesday, and we have a couple of cleanup matters to do here on the governor's race. Alan Fung, now the subject of complaints by both Republican Patricia Morgan and incumbent governor, Democrat Gina Raimondo. For those of you who are questioning the credibility of the politics of this, just go to Common Cause and their website. They have filed a complaint against Alan Fung as well, all for this situation that has to do with the rent that he paid in 2014, 16, and 18, governor's race in 14, now race in 18, and his mayor race in 2016, where it doesn't look like he paid any rent, even though checks were sent, they were held. The whole thing is just a confounding mess, no doubt about it. Governor Raimondo, of course, says we got to get to the bottom of this.
Everybody has to play by the same rules. It seems like Mayor Fung's trying to get around the rules, and we should get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, well, at some juncture, the Board of Elections is going to have to get to the bottom of it in toot sweet. Fung is suggesting that this is just part of the culture, that discount rents are just part of what politicians get, deserve, and need because of their temporary status for campaign headquarters. It's a pile of bunk, and what I don't know is whether he knows it, but stay tuned. All right, let's talk about what happened here. Well, it's been happening for a while, but the heat was on yesterday. Trump defiant as crisis grows over family. Yeah, he was defiant today too. This is this morning's headline from yesterday's news. He was at a speaking event today. He was just kind of going nuts. But the Homeland Security Secretary, put herself into a late 5 o'clock press conference. She was actually called in from New Orleans to face the reporters when the regular White House briefing early in the afternoon was postponed because the heat was on and the video and audio of those little ones at the border had made its way through the National Press Corps. I got a thought about this Homeland Security Secretary. I think Secretary Nielsen has her fingers and toes crossed. She looked really, really angry yesterday during that briefing, and I don't think she was just angry at the questions. I think she was angry that she was put in that position to be the face of this. And while it would be a rare thing, I would, if I was a betting man, and occasionally I am, I would put a couple of dollars down on the idea that she's going to lose her cookies and flip on this administration if she's put in a position one more time to have to do what she did yesterday. But here's an update on what did happen.
President Trump will be heading to Capitol Hill to meet with House Republicans about 2 immigration bills. But broader border issues have taken a back seat to the separation of children from their parents at the border, a direct result of the Trump administration's new zero-tolerance policy on people entering the country illegally.
The United States will not be a migrant camp.
This morning, Congressman Mark Meadows, the chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, was at the White House for meetings.
Really, at this point, it's more a legislative action. I think the administration has said that. It's up to the Congress to act on this particular thing.
The White House insists the solution must come from Congress, and President Trump is pinning the blame squarely on the shoulders of Democrats. The president tweeted, "Democrats are the problem. They don't care about crime and want illegal immigrants, no matter how bad they may be, to pour in and infest our country."
And let me tell you, when the president is saying that this is all on the Democrats, that it's their law, that's just not right. That's not true.
Texas Republican Ted Cruz is working on a solution for the Senate side. He's introducing a bill that would reunite separated families, authorize new temporary shelters to house them, and double the number of federal immigration judges to work through a backlog of asylum requests.
All of us who are seeing these images of children being pulled away from moms and dads in tears, we're horrified. This has to stop.
The president has previously said he would only sign immigration bills that addressed his 4 pillars: money to build the wall, finding a fix for DACA, ending family-based immigration, and ending the visa lottery program.
Well, you are always my foreign policy expert, but reportedly this immigration thing is about security. So we'll stretch it. Naval War College professor Marc, who speaks for himself and not the Naval War College. Welcome.
Thank you.
Just back from Europe. Looking forward to hearing about that. But you agree with me that the Secretary of Homeland Security looked like she was almost coerced into that presentation yesterday?
She's had a hard time with Trump. Trump's insulted her. I wouldn't disagree with that characterization of her being rather angry. I don't know if she's long for the Trump administration.
No. I mean, I think it just reeked of someone who knew that the consistency of discussion from the administration was impossible. The press more or less had her cornered everywhere she went in terms of consistency with the Attorney General, consistency with the President himself, and it looked like she was getting angrier and angrier at things that were actually generated by the White House as problems for her. I mean, she's no dope, right? So she's going to go home and say, you know what, how much of this is worth it? Don't you think?
I would if I were her. This is a policy. Look, I blame everyone here. I blame President Trump for the zero tolerance, and all that is to get leverage over the Democrats for a broader immigration bill, which makes sense. A broader immigration bill is good. The only problem is that this zero tolerance was literally created to get this kind of media coverage, to try to push the Democrats into concessions. It hasn't worked. It's backfired. It's now time for people like Cruz and others to get together.
Only because he's got a Democratic congressman running for U.S. Senate that's putting on a show down there himself, creating rallies and all that kind of thing. Ted Cruz feigning compassion is kind of a funny thing to watch, isn't it?
Well, look, both sides want this issue, right? Trump wants to excite his base, and the Democrats want to excite their base. This is the perfect issue for both of them. That's why you're seeing such a polarization here when everyone knows common sense, a moderate solution is right there for everyone to take.
What is the moderate solution?
The moderate solution is a series of, first of all, you allow children to be taken into custody with their parents. You don't separate them. Then you do something about the dreamers, so-called dreamers, in which, again, a compromise is simple. It's allow the dreamers to get in the back of the line and, wait to get citizenship, but don't kick them out. That's a compromise that both Republican moderates and Democratic moderates feel good with.
I don't know. This notion that it's backfiring on the president only around the base. The base has a little erosion. I mean, I saw data last night. CNN had a poll. I think 56% of Republicans polled support what's going on here. Not 75%, which is a number that is kind of Trumpian. It's usually in the 70-75% range. But still, a handful more than majority of Republicans polled like what they see down there, whereas the rest of the country is like 70-30. The independents run about a 30-point spread. Democrats are like a 90-point spread. They're all freaking out about the whole thing. Boy, does that evidence the kind of crystallized polarization that we have in this country right now. I've never seen it like this ever.
Well, it's because both sides have gone extreme. On the left, the sanctuary cities, where you just negate federal law, don't cooperate with the immigration and enforcement agencies, that's a violation of the law. So you have the hard left doing what they're doing and saying, look, there should be a borderless, there should be no borders between the countries. Anyone who wants to come here should. And then you had the hard right, which is saying we should have no immigration whatsoever, even though this country is built on immigration. Again, the middle has to come up and come up with certain compromises that make sense.
It's fascinating that you say that because, you know, the left and the right, I mean, it's not as simple as that when it comes to the different levels of government. Most of the sanctuary decisions are being made at the mezzanine level of government, at the mayoralties, the big city mayoralties, and even some of the governorships. But it's not Washington. It's different thinking across the country, and so you've got this left-right thing, but you also have this Washington versus local control thing going on, and so I don't even know how you bring the sanctuary city disposition to the table in Washington unless Democrats in Washington actually get tough on it and send the message back to their own Democratic city leaderships.
Sure. I mean, the federal government has threatened to stop federal money coming into the cities for certain numbers of social cases. So there are ways to do this. And again, what happens is both parties want this. Both parties want polarization because they believe that their base is key to victory, particularly in the off-year elections that are coming up this year.
They want this because it's key to victory.
Let's get out the vote.
Does anybody actually want to solve a problem for its intrinsic value? No, seriously, you laugh at that. Can you imagine that you laugh, and understandably, that in this time frame, in this period of our history, that a guy who studies this as close as you do instinctively laughs over that question?
Well, I think it's part of it is the funding, right? I mean, if you're a Democrat, you're going to go to organizations that are more liberal in nature, so they're going to demand certain stands on certain issues. Same thing with Republicans. So if we could do something about reining in campaign finance laws, then we might have a shot.
All right, we come back. I'm dying to know what Marc thinks about Kim Jong-un. You remember that story, right? Be right back.
I said 2 weeks ago that I did not support the decision of the Trump administration to separate kids from their families, and I think it's cruel and inhumane, and we told the National Guard to hold steady and to not go down to the border, period. So we won't be supporting that initiative.
It's just wrong. It is wrong. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, it's wrong. It's inhumane and it's immoral, and we have to do everything, each of us in our own power, to stop it.
So that's where I want to talk about Korea here, but North Korea. But just for a second, I didn't want to miss that mezzanine form of government, if you will, the governors and mayors. This Charlie Baker and other Republicans, I think, probably worry the Trump administration more that he's just he's got a popularity rating about 70% right now. The Massachusetts governor is highly respected by the electorate. Just soft-spoken, saying, "Listen, I don't want anything to do with this, ever, right?"
Well, I love the way that Raimondo rode the wave and said, "Oh yeah, me too."
Yeah.
Even though she's not going to be asked by the Trump administration to send troops there.
No.
So I mean, it's campaign year, and you're going to demagogue any of these issues you can.
And you got to take a stand. All right, so let's talk about what happened with Kim Jong-un. What was your gut check on the entire Singapore summits?
Well, the verdict is still out, to be fair. I was surprised that the ceremony, the grand stage that both of the individuals took went as smoothly as it did. There were no really stupid comments on either side.
Well, I don't know. I thought it was pretty stupid for the President of the United States to suggest that he was honored to be with Kim Jong-un. I mean, how in the heck did that family get status with the presidency of the United States?
You know, I take a little. I disagree with that because look, when Nixon went to China,
Then
he
get
met
out.
with
Get off the set. You can't disagree with me.
Look, Richard Nixon goes to China, opens up China, and he meets with the greatest mass murderer of the history of the human race, Mao Zedong. So, I mean, we have been working with dictators forever.
Oh, I don't think I understand.
And we praise them all the time.
I don't know. Honored, whatever, semantics, you were saying. Other than that, I agree. There were no process mistakes in this thing. One could say a little bit too much pomp and circumstance, flags from North Korea and the United States side by side, yikes. But everything went according to plan, right?
Yes. The only problem was the tradition is the president comes after all of the details are ironed out, or there's only one or two issues that they have to compromise on. So this is the cart before the horse a bit. And when Trump comes back home and declares victory, it's wildly premature.
No longer a nuclear threat.
Right.
I mean, come on, man. Well, what happened to the discernment that people in this country, I thought, had to be able to say, "You got to be kidding me"? Like, well, why? How is that digested as even close to practical for the commander-in-chief to say?
Well, I think in the Trump administration, the genius of it is you're defining success way, way, way down. So you have only a year ago, you know, the exchange of Rocket Man and I'm going to nuke you and my nuke's bigger than your nuke and people are getting all upset to, you know, Kim I can work with. Most people will go, I would rather have Kim I can work with than Rocket Man. So if we define it continually and keep the, you know, the level of success at a marginal level, then you know we can live with it.
Are we giving away the store by suggesting there will be no war practice with South Korea? You know, we're going to can at least one exercise this summer.
We have multiple exercises over the course of any year. So delaying one exercise may be a prudent thing to do. But if you completely do away with those exercises, then that's a mistake. I suspect that Trump will try to pressure Kim to do some kind of compromise, and then if that doesn't happen, he'll resume the games to try to regain leverage. The key here, though, is Kim now is going to China again. So all of a sudden, the hermit kingdom, in which he never left, he's going to Singapore, he's going to China now twice, he's met with the United States. Kim is learning how to be an effective diplomat. And
is he extending past his comfort zone?
Not yet. And frankly, he's going to China to try to leverage the United States. So he's trying to leverage both China and the United States against one another to try to get a better deal from both. It's clever diplomacy. We haven't given this person enough credit.
All right. Denuclearization is the concept that they agree that they're going to work towards. I don't know that they spend any time sharing common definition.
No, and let's face it, complete denuclearization is not going to happen. They already are a nuclear power. They already have intercontinental ballistic missiles. What we can hope to do is try to marginalize that, try to get them to stop their testing, perhaps have limitations on their intercontinental ballistic missiles, stop testing nuclear warheads. And if we can do that, that's a significant success. But there's an old saying, once the nuclear genie is out of the bottle, you can't put it back in.
The professor was in Europe. I'd like to see what the perspective was there when we come back. Stay with us. Okay, there they are. What did the Europeans say about it? I know you were studying some other stuff when you were over there and debating some other things, but what was the European take on what happened in Singapore?
They really have a lot of antipathy toward Trump. They don't trust him. They are really, look, the Europeans are best at doing one thing, worrying about the Europeans. Everything's about them. So they see an erosion of Europe's special relationship with the United States under the Trump administration. They worry about his negotiating style. Trump insulted Merkel, did a whole series of things that have completely alienated
Did
the
a little
Europeans.
dance step on Trudeau.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean the G7 thing got very little attention. It got a half a news cycle's attention because it was literally on the eve of the Singapore summit.
Right.
But he's in the plane heading to Singapore, and he's whacking Trudeau for just standing up for his own tariff position, as if he's not allowed to speak to his own country about what he thought the results of the G7 talks were. And he's like, hey, you can't do that. And a little bit, wise guy Brooklyn, the disposition. He's going to hit him with a couple more. He really does consider this United States of America Constitution and economy to be part of his play toy, doesn't he? I mean, it's it's amazing.
Here's the sad thing. Trump is actually correct in a certain number of policies. For example, the NATO countries do not pay their fair share. In fact, Germany pays 1% of its GDP toward defense. Right. 1%. Only 8 out of 29 states in NATO pay the 2% that they have pledged to pay. Trade. German trade practices are unfair. They are. NATO itself, not NATO, but the European Union has a lot of unfair trade practices that bar a lot of American goods from competing on an even keel with European goods. So Trump has a number of issues, particularly trade with China. China steals all of our high-tech advances, and they have a tremendously closed marketplace. So he is right to put pressure. The problem is, instead of going through the World Trade Organization, instead of going through mainstream institutions that can help legitimize U.S. true problems with trade, he goes off half-cocked, calls everyone names, and becomes a demagogue. And he actually hurts the very issues that he's right on, and it's a shame.
You were discussing Afghanistan when you were there. You took a position on U.S. getting out?
Yes, I've thought for the last 8 or 9 years that we should get out. And there's an old truism and strategy. When the costs exceed the value of obtaining that political objective, you must stop the war, right? It's cost-benefit analysis. And the amount of time, blood, and treasure that we have spent in Afghanistan, after 17 years, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and now Daesh have as much control over Afghanistan as they did 10 years ago. So if we're not succeeding, then strategy tells us that it's time to end the war.
If we leave, they're on their own to regroup. Isn't that the worry?
Well, what we do is we keep a few of our Special Force assets in there and our intel assets. But then, over the next year or so, what I would do is gradually pull out American troops, reduce our aid, because we've been training up the Afghan army for 17 years. After 17 years, they should be able to fight for themselves. And we've trained them in the worst way possible. We trained them in our image. To rely on mobility, overwhelming firepower.
Do we do it subtly in your mind, or should we set a date? We set dates, and I think that becomes a problem, right?
I would set a date.
You would?
Obama was right. Get out. It is time to force, we call it putting the Afghans on death ground. That will make them fight.
What's next in the news cycle? I got 10 seconds.
With Trump, one never knows. I'm sure he's going to insult some other European close ally like Trudeau or something.
You think we'll get an immigration reform plan, or is this going to be acrimony for a long time down there?
That's a good question. Before the election, because I think both sides need this issue, unless somebody comes up with a sane idea. Maybe Cruz can do it. I suspect this is going to go on because both parties want it.
Final word when we come back. Thank you, Professor.